Hello friends, welcome to the Zell Unicus course on ESG. There is nothing in the recent past that has captured the entire organization's and the government's attention more than ESG. I am Neerav Patel, your faculty for today. I am a partner with Unicus Consultech Inc., an expert consulting firm on ESG advisory. I have 23 years of experience in professional consulting, and I'm going to be talking to you about the basic tenets of what ESG is all about. The history and the evolution of ESG is a fairly creative process. This started off way back in the 80s, where companies and organizations were focusing really on the environment, health, and safety matters, which was called as EH&S, where companies were very cognizant of what their impact they are having on the environment and the health and safety of its employees, its team members. That wasn't enough because the companies were not doing enough. The whole discussion then moved towards the impact of climate change. Global warming became an important term which captured the attention of governments, multilateral agencies, and companies across the world. The focus then shifted to what companies are doing on sustainability, what government is doing to ensure companies become more and more sustainable, the products become more sustainable. Thereafter, the advent of corporate social responsibility, or defining what is the real purpose of an organization beyond merely profits or shareholder returns. What is it really doing for the betterment of the society, for its employees that it serves? All of this was okay, in its own silos until someone decided that this has to be brought under one umbrella, and the acronym ESG was coined, which essentially covers environment, social, and governance. Right? Some of the basic things that you will understand and go through during the entire currency of the course are: what are the real dimensions? What are the boundaries? How do you get your arms around what these terms would include? Environment would include the entire discussion and what companies are doing around climate change, around their emissions. How are they doing, or what steps are they doing to reduce that? How are they managing scarce resources like water, like land? How are they reducing the effluents that they discharge, the pollutants to air, to water? How are they ensuring the biodiversity is not disturbed? How are they contributing to positivity towards afforestation, towards making sure the water resources are kind of carefully conserved? How are they managing waste? What quantum of their products are recycled? How circular their entire supply chain is? So those are the dimensions you'll understand are under the environment parameter. Moving to social, again, more and more companies are realizing that they need to focus on the employee well-being. They need to focus on diversity, on equity, on inclusivity of the workforce, not just of their own organization, but also of their supply chains, also of their suppliers and various other constituents, who work closely with them. How are they spanning on the entire human rights and the things around labor management? You might have heard about topics such as modern slavery. These are becoming an everyday topic of discussions in boardrooms. How are companies doing for the community at large? Are they adversely impacting the community? Are they doing enough to negate any sort of impact that their organization might be having on the entire community around them? Are their products such that they don't cause any harm to the consumers that they are sought to kind of serve? You might have heard about the controversy around lead in toys for children. You might have heard about product recalls of pharmaceutical companies across the world. All of this is to ensure that the social parameter or that pillar is well kind of taken care of by organization. Moving to the third tenet, which is governance, is equally important. How are companies governed? How independent their board is? How is the board making sure that they are accountable or they are held accountable by the shareholders? What are your risk management policies? How are you putting it all together in a program? These matters are equally important to all stakeholders, not just the investors, and an important parameter in how companies are measured on these things. So this is just to give you an idea of what are the kind of dimensions or the boundaries that this whole topic will cover. What's the key drivers? Who pushes this agenda? Who decides what needs to be done? Climate change, as I said, has been a big deciding factor on how companies adopt these requirements. This is becoming far more important than it ever was. As someone said, we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. That cannot be more truer, and through the currency of the course, you will really understand the weightage of this particular statement. Consumer behavior, more and more companies, their customers are asking of them as to how are they kind of scoring, or how are they kind of making sure that ESG parameters are adopted by them. Even if your company is part of a supply chain, for example, if you're working for large multinational companies in Europe or in America, they will ask of you, what have you done on ESG parameters? Investors are asking these questions. So what are organizations doing on ESG? They simply don't want to put their money in companies who are only making profit and don't have a real purpose. They want a balancing act between both these parameters. They may not be a zero-sum game. One is not at the cost of the other, but how are you synergizing and making sure that you optimize both profit as well as the purpose on ESG parameters? Suppliers, your partners are asking these questions of you, whether how are you doing on ESG parameters. Employees are increasingly becoming more and more conscious on how companies are operating on their purpose and how are they faring on some of the social parameters. Things like focus on diversity, on inclusivity, on equity, on overall well-being are not just buzzwords, but really important things that organizations have to do if they want to attract and retain top talent. Last but not the least, the regulators. Given the importance that this topic has on various stakeholders, which I just mentioned, the regulators also want to ensure that what the companies are doing, it makes sense, it is compliant. Regulators are actively framing standards, asking companies to follow framework, get them assured so that the information that companies put out is accurate and it meets the entire purpose for which the companies have set out to achieve the ESG parameters. The entire disclosures, the entire things that companies look out for, the topics that they are focusing on, the targets that they set, the milestone that they have achieved, all have to be measured and reported using a framework and using a set of standards. Over the period of the course, you will understand what these frameworks mean, what these really diverse standards seem to indicate, but it is important that there is uniformity now developing over the last few months on what these standards should be and how they should be implemented and what frameworks are applicable in which country. India is not far behind. In fact, India has a fairly evolved requirement which is prescribed by SEBI on what companies should do in terms of their reporting on ESG parameters to their stakeholders, including shareholders. They have to report on a requirement called BRSR, which for the current year of 2024 has become even more onerous and even more prescriptive, with an added layer of requirement for companies to get this reasonably assured or audited by an assurance provider to make sure that the data that is being put out passes the muster of a scrutiny and the data can be relied upon by various stakeholders.